And then you should get a little notification that this session is being recorded. All right, I want to thank you all for joining us today. This is a Pima County feedback session on prom and graduation. We have some ideas around prom graduation, but I think it's really important from a community health related perspective. If you're going to do anything, you need feedback from the people that are actually doing it. And frankly, I think you all probably have a lot more creative and implementable ideas on COVID-friendly prom and graduation strategies and way to implement those events in a safe way, that you're still allowing students this kind of like social coming of age rite of passage, right? Which is an important part of adolescent development. So we hope to get a lot of feedback from you. We encourage you to be strongly critical as much as possible. Because a lot of this feedback is going to go back to the state, and we are going to implement some of these recommendations and the strategies moving forward. So everyone, so far, if you haven't, go ahead and type your name and your high school and the district that you represent in the chat box, which you should be able to find a little call out button that looks like a comic book quote that says show conversation. So the main things that we see to consider when you're implementing prom or graduation are the following 4 items: location selection, mitigation guidance for attendance, and that's both for supervisors, for students who are actually at the site, and for any other volunteers or teachers who are attending those events, parents in the case of graduation strategies, the size of the event, and the duration of the event. And the combination of these 4 factors are important to consider when moving forward with your plans with these types of events. With location selection, the main things that we kind of see as priority from a health perspective and related to COVID mitigation, outdoors obviously are going to be preferred because you have a higher level of ability to mitigate spread through ventilation strategies. Good ventilation or airflow if you're not able to do outdoor strategies. If it's a prom related event and it's an outdoor location, you want to make sure you have places with high visibility for kids to hang in pods or strategize in pods. So maybe setting up sections with couches or with seating arrangements across a football field or across an arena area where kids can kind of pod and socially distance in smaller group settings. Hand washing and making sure that there's adequate hand washing availability throughout the location that you're working with. Food option provisions. We have been looking a lot at like food trucks, and that's been suggested as an implementable food strategy if you're planning an outdoor event. And that seemed to have been successful. I've heard that strategy at Sarita School District for one of their upcoming outdoor events that they're doing. The nice thing about those food trucks is that they're all certified through the health department, and then they can all do kind of like pre-packaged meals through some kind of pre-deal that you do with those. And then the last thing to kind of think about obviously is dancing, and how do you do that creatively? I mean, if you're in a Catholic school setting, you can always use the Leave Room for Jesus or the Holy Trinity, right? But that doesn't always work at the public school level. So what I'd like to do right now is I'd like you all to kind of just either you can choose to unmute or you can post in the chat. What are some of the things that you're thinking or reflecting about in relation to these specific strategies and location selection? And the first thing that I'd like you to think about is, what are you thinking, outdoor or indoor? Are there other factors that relate back to the location that aren't listed within these strategies? In relation to indoor locations, if you go with some kind of agency like Tucson Convention Center or some like La Paloma or a location like that, all of those events work already with the health department at ensuring there's certain standards that are set in regards to maximum number of attendees. So that does take a little bit less of the burden off of you in terms of that planning, because they can help to set up some of those pre-logistics for you. Okay. So yeah, at this point, go ahead, unmute. I'm going to mute myself, and then feel free to contribute to the conversation. I would like everyone to say something, even if it's just pass, and then you can utilize the chat as well. Okay. And I think maybe to help stimulate conversation, what I'll do is I'll just go down the list here. So let's start with Dottie Russell.
Hi, this is Russell Doty. Yes, I'm just very concerned at all of the. I think graduation's piece of cake. We can handle that. I just think that prom is just one of those events that I'm not willing to put myself out there for, because there's no way for us to keep kids socially distant and it not be an event that isn't just a potential horrific spreading event. So.
Thank you, Russell. Good feedback. Jennifer is from our department, and we should do introductions on our side here in a little bit. But John Knepp.
Hi, we're going to do, we're planning a prom depending on what the data looks like, and we're going to do it outside in our, probably either in our courtyard or our football field, although I don't want heels on our football field. And you'll potentially have a food truck there, decorate wherever we do it, but just have an open air prom opportunity for kids to get together and have a prom experience before they leave school. So,
thank you, sir. Julia Kaiser.
Hi there. So we are planning our prom on our tennis courts. That way it's outside. It's also we can decorate it pretty nicely. And we're doing a couple limiting things. We're just allowing seniors, and you know, that way our junior, we typically do junior senior, but we're going to keep it smaller. We have a little with tickets. They're getting a pair of flip-flops that have our school logo on them, so that we don't ruin our tennis courts. And we are looking at food trucks and definitely the potting situation. And as far as dancing goes, we'll probably on different courts maybe have some different music playing so that we can kind of spread that out a little bit. And then graduation we're doing at the TCC, so they already have given us like a 1,300 restriction, and our senior class is pretty small, so that shouldn't be a problem for us.
Oh, thank you. And John, I just want to make sure I didn't cut you off if you had anything else you wanted to finish on. Sorry.
Nope, I'm good. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, sir. Kim Middleton.
Hi. We're also planning our prom as an outdoor event. We are going to host it in our courtyard on our campus. We're actually hosting 2 nights for prom to keep the number low. We're limiting the number of tickets for each night to hopefully 250 people total. That includes students and adults chaperoning the event in our outdoor courtyard. Love the idea of creating pods of seating in different areas to create that social distancing aspect and keeping them potted. So we're definitely going to pick up on that. Also love Julia's idea of different music in different areas to keep the kids more separated. So we're going to do that as well. Planning on food trucks for food service at that event. And so that's where we are with our planning of prom so far. And as far as graduation goes, I'm with Julia. We are planning on hosting our graduation at the Tucson Convention Center, and are going to work with Pima County Health Department on following their guidance on limiting the number of people to attend.
Great. And we'll actually have a little bit of feedback from Jennifer McDowell on that here today too. So look forward to that later in the call. Brian Lambert.
I think we're really just here to hear what other people are doing. We're definitely looking for graduation, probably in each of the high school stadiums. And then if we do prom, possibly looking at options for outdoor proms as well. So.
Thank you, sir. Holly Lehman Hamill.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Eller. I'm here with Brian Lambert and the other regionals from TUSD, trying to get some good ideas that would best support these things for kids for our district.
Gotcha. And please call me Brian, ma'am. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Nicole Lowry.
Hi there, following suit with Brian Lambert and Holly Lehman-Hamill. Thank you.
Albert Malice.
Wow, very French. I appreciate it. It's AJ Malice. I'm a part of Amphitheater School District over at Amphi High School. Really, we're in the preliminary stages of putting this all together. The biggest thing is we're aiming for outdoor venues for both prom and graduation. I agree with Rusty. I'm a little concerned about getting a whole bunch of teenagers together that haven't been together in a while and convincing them that they need to stay socially distant. Not even using a 6-foot idea, but just socially distanced and safe. I'm just not sure how viable that is. I understand the importance, the cultural and societal importance of prom, but yet is it the best thing for our kids in terms of safety and well-being? I'm curious to know what everybody really thinks about that. I understand the pressures of offering normalcy for kids after a year of this. But at the same time, what's the cost benefit? Graduation, I think that we can do with limited number of people allowed in the venue and spreading kids out. I think our football stadiums are gonna prove to be very effective for that. But really curious to know what people are honestly thinking about prom in terms of what's realistic and what's viable. So,
thank you, Mr. Malice. Matt Donaldson.
Hi, guys. Yeah, AJ, I have some of those concerns too. Right now, we are moving forward though with a prom. I believe we're looking at May 1st for our prom. We are going to limit it to just our seniors. So we have 200 seniors. So with staff members, keeping it under 220. Not sure right now on location. We have Savoy Opera House that we had gotten last year, so we still have that kind of retained. We have talked to them. They have let us know that we would be able to move everything pretty much outside, having a larger area outside kind of roped off, being able to move the all dancing, all the music, everything outside. Still having some indoor seating, although I'm not sure exactly what that would look like. Not sure if we're going to do that or if we're going to hold it on our campus. Is the other option, doing same day, same number of students, but just holding it on our campus and just having a little bit more oversight of that on our part. Like the idea about the food trucks. We weren't really going to do anything with the food piece. We were going to leave that for students on their own, but just more providing the location and place and time. As far as graduation, we're also planning to do ours out on the field. I've been sharing with parents that we are planning to do an in-person graduation. We're just not sure on how many people we will be allowing to come to that event. Whether that will be, we typically limit it to six tickets per student to get on the field. What we'll probably do is really limit maybe just having kids on the field and having parents in our stands. So where we are right now.
Thank you, Matthew Munger.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Love some of the ideas hearing from our principal colleagues around the city, especially the food truck idea. That's quite brilliant. I think primarily for us, the central question we have is if there's going to be some sort of forthcoming change on social distancing guidelines or recommendations, because to entertain any notion of a senior prom and an event that is so important to students, let alone graduation, I think involves, will there be any forthcoming changes on what's recommended for social distancing guidelines, particularly as our area districts begin to transition to full in-person instruction. Aside from that, and I'd love to hear the response to that, as I'm sure others would, is, we're looking at primarily a senior dinner. We've agreed that if there's going to be any event, it will occur outdoors using various I guess, sub venues, if you will, around campus to utilize, different areas. I think the idea of having different venues with different music is brilliant. We're also looking at something like a senior sunrise. And then again, the food trucks is a great idea. We are looking at holding our graduation in our stadium. And so much as Mr. Malice indicated, myself, Ms. Boulay, who's the principal over CDO, and Mr. Malice are all looking at what sort of guidelines and parameters we can put in place for a graduation that will occur in our stadiums.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sean Rodriguez.
Hi, Brian. So for our school, pretty redundant to some of the things that you've heard, we've pushed our prom back as far as we possibly could. It will take place a week prior to graduation. And that was the sort of the proactive thoughts of the student council in hopes of some limitations being lifted. But other than that, when we did a walkthrough with our decorator, same thing, different genres of music throughout the courtyard. Students were more than happy to return to their campus for the last time and having it at the campus. So, kind of spreading it out and having those different genres with maybe a couple of different dance floors. I think for us, what will be huge is duration of time, where maybe offering either the food trucks or a formal dinner. The food trucks is something new that I heard here today, which I think is a great idea, but where you have a bit of a more controlled setting, if you have them sitting down and having a formal dinner. And then if you allow them that socialization where it's a little bit more controlled, and then, unfortunately, we would limit maybe the time for dancing and so forth, but they also had that other time to socialize and talk and things like that while they're eating. So I think it's really important to have a decreased amount of time for a prom event. I also think visibility, probably spending or earmarking more money than we ever have on supervision to enforce mask wearing. We also will be ordering prom themed masks that match whatever the theme is for the evening, to encourage them to keep it on. But I think the enforcement will just have to be ad nauseum, to the point where the students understand that you've got to wear your mask and if we want this thing to work. So pretty much what you've heard here. As far as our graduation, I'm more than ecstatic to have it in our stadium. It's a huge, tradition for everyone. And so anything that TUSD is proposing in terms of limiting guests or what have you, we'll be following suit with that.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. All right, 3 more. Richard Sanchez.
Yeah, I'm joining Brian and Holly as a regional assistant superintendent for TUSD. So I'm just listening to all the great ideas. Thank you.
All right, Tara Belay.
Hi, I'm sorry. I apologize. I was having some technical difficulties. Yeah, I mean, as you've heard already from Mr. Munger, we work pretty closely on talking about what we're going to do with the 3 high schools here in Amphi. And a lot of these ideas, I think a lot of us are all sort of, just trying to give the kids an experience of some kind. I mean, these are kids that didn't get it their junior year either. So moving outside, and I like the food truck idea. That's a great idea. Yeah, I think I'm just going to echo, a lot of what Mr. Munger said, because he kind of covered our group conversation. So I just want to thank you for having this conversation, though, because it's so important that our parents have just been waiting to hear, are we going to be able to do anything for our seniors? So I just want to thank you for hosting us as well.
No problem. And Teresa Hill.
Hi, so I'm with Walden Grove, and we initially were supposed to be at the Savoy Opera House, and we changed it to our campus. It'll be in our parking lot. It'll be May 8th, so that we pushed it as far back as we could, and they're going to have a open tent with seating and a central, it's Broadway and themed, so it's going to have a central park. We're doing the food trucks. They're also doing little gift bags so that the kids have, as they come in, they'll have their own snacks and water in their bag, as well as, a mask and whatever else that kind of goes with their ticket. and we'll just be spreading them out. They talked about having like a checkered tiled, because they're going to rent the dance floor because the kids don't want to dance on the parking lot, and doing it like a checkered board so that we have big circles so that the kids are dancing with their friends somewhat socially distanced. We've been using our lunch periods to work with our kids. We don't limit the number of kids off the courtyard. In the courtyard, we have 4 or less to sit at a table, and then outside they can sit in groups of bigger than 4. And so we've already taught them how to do that 6 feet apart. And so we're hoping that they can take what they learned how to do at lunch into the field. And then normally I have my staff do 1 hour of a dance. Since we don't have 3 dances, we only have 1. Everybody will be doing an hour. So we'll definitely have increased supervision to help enforcing the masks and the social distancing piece. I think I already said we're having the food trucks as well. I think that kind of covers most of it. As far as graduation, we're looking at doing it on the field as well, and having the kids socially distanced. And the unknown is if they will have any guests that will be able to attend or not based on metrics, and we will be live streaming it.
Great. Okay, awesome strategies overall. A couple things that I do want to address. So with the food truck implementation, multiple food trucks having a previously selected menu and then allocating times based on the tickets for them to pick up their food orders from the food truck based on what they select is a really good strategy to stagger out meals so you don't have everyone eating at the same time. And that's kind of like a potting strategy for eating. So that's one thing to kind of think about implementing. The PE teacher in me was rejoicing, Miss Hill, when you were talking about the pod dancing and having, like, in my head, I was thinking of my 2nd grade class with the hula hoops and teaching lessons about spacing. So that's a really great strategy, using some infrastructural components that allow for social distancing ingrained into the actual dancing itself. The checkerboard idea is genius. That's a great idea. So those are a couple things. I heard a couple of you ask about the metrics and what they're going to be, more or less. If I had the ability to predict where we were going to be in the next 2 weeks, I'd probably be paid a lot more. The thing is that we're not quite sure where we're going to go. We're pretty sure we're in a downhill trend. The big kind of game variance right now is the variant itself. So we'll know more as we continue to plug through it, and we'll do our best to try to keep you all informed of where we're at in terms of the metrics. I'm going to show some graphics here from the CDC too, which will help kind of understand or break down that social distancing component when we start to get into moderate transmission, which our hope is that we'll be in moderate by the time prom rolls around. For mitigation guidance for attendance, yeah, you want to just reemphasize everything they've already been doing at school, right? Masking with fidelity, making sure it's an appropriate fit, staying home if they're sick, physical distancing within that strategy. One other thing that we've heard is testing before the event. So part of the ticket being that in order for them to get a ticket, they take a test up to a certain time period in advance of the actual event itself. If you have the ability to do point of care testing on site for students coming in, that's definitely a cost associated with that. But there are organizations that we can connect you to that can help you out with that. Paradigm testing would be one. I know a lot of your athletics departments already subcontract with certain testing groups to test your athletes on either a weekly or a twice a week basis. So those are some strategies you can implement. And then the other things to kind of think about are how to get there, what happens when you're there, and what happens after. I'm talking about how to get there, having carpooling or limos or things like that. That changes the close contact availability. So I heard a really good idea from one of my colleagues, Kristen, on the phone about how in her one of her events, there was a strategy to prevent students from drink driving, where each student had to drive their own individual vehicle. And then that was part of the strategy to prevent drinking or alcohol use at the site itself. So integrating that with part of the messaging of getting to the location could be one idea to limit that close contact beforehand. Thinking about salon visits and tux fits and things beforehand as well. I really like some of the ideas about providing footwear or providing masks that are specific to the event itself, but also maybe thinking about dress down, like a jeans and a t-shirt type event or something along those lines. And then the happening after. So looking at your timelines for when the prom actually occurs and having a daytime event is one strategy that you can look at to prevent after parties that go on late into the evening. So that's one other strategy to think about for that specific guidance on attendance. Some of the size things, what is the maximum attendance that you can safely do? We're going to try to help you with that as we continue to navigate through the metrics. And sometimes, we won't know that until a week in advance. We talked again about the strategies to cohort and pod as it relates to food services, as it relates to dancing strategies, other things of that nature. There have been some other creative ideas that we've heard with using things like hula hoops and jump ropes for dancing, or using like inflatable donuts or things of that nature, or like the bubbles to keep people cohorted or socially distanced during dance floor events. And then the last thing is the duration, which I think already you all have probably spoken to much more than what I possibly could have. I see just a couple comments I want to go back and address. Teresa Hill is mentioning that they are taking temps at the door and going through symptom checks at the door. That is a great strategy. Asymptomatic transmission is less likely to happen than symptomatic transmission. So those temp checks and symptom screens at the door are helpful. We would encourage that to happen before the event as well, too. So just one other thing to think about. So before I move on to the graduation piece, just a rough set of feedback from the group, because I know we're 1 minute short here at 4:30. We did get started a couple minutes late. Any other feedback, things that we need to think about, or what else you would like to see from us? You are going to get some official guidance that's going to come out in a document format that's going to incorporate the ideas we heard today, as well as stuff from the state, which should be coming out in the next week or two. Hopefully this conversation will contribute to that guidance that's released from the state. One of the big things I heard was we need to know what the mitigation is. So while you all, if you'll just take a minute to unmute and address any other questions, I'm going to pull up some of the metrics from the state, which are important to consider.
Brian, do you have a recommendation on like whether or not it'd be better to hold the event at our school versus a location, or does that just have to do with, individual locations and what they're able to provide, really?
I'm kind of 50-50 either way. Jennifer, I'm actually going to have you jump in here and just talk a little bit more about the event process, if you wouldn't mind just talking about that for a minute.
Sure, and that's an excellent question. So the event centers, they already have certain requirements that they have to follow under the Pima County proclamation. So, and I'm sorry, I'm Jennifer McDowell. I'm with Consumer Health and Food Safety here in the Pima County Health Department. I apologize, I didn't introduce myself. But under the proclamation, not only do restaurants and dine-in establishments have a set criteria that they have to abide by, it also is applicable to catered events and event spaces. So they do have different regulatory requirements if you were to choose to do an event space instead. As far as events, of course, being outdoors is the most beneficial because you have that open air, and it really sounds like that is the direction everyone is going. But we do have as far as public organized events, a good calculator that might be helpful if you're having your events and such at your school outdoors. Something that we use for the public organized events when we review special event applications is for a calculation of capacity. What we use is 150 square feet per person. So we take the the usable venue area, you divide it by 150, and that gives you a good calculation of how many people could be in that space and actually maintain adequate physical distancing and such. So that is a measure that you could use when you're calculating your outdoor space. And Mr. Donaldson, you're an awesome principal. My youngest daughter, Paige, graduated from there last year. So
Thank you very much.
Tell her we
said hi.
Higher. No.
Thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate that. So I'm just putting the 150 per person in the chat there, just as a number reference for everyone here. One quick thing to highlight. So I think you're all aware of the new COVID school benchmarks that came out from the state that show PIMA and substantial. We have some qualms with the way they decided these numbers, but we can't get too much into the weeds with that right now. What the CDC recommends, we currently should actually be in high according to our data at 104 per 100,000 cases. We're labeled as substantial by the state, which the CDC definitely recommends physical distancing is 6 feet or more, and that's required. The governor's order cites that 6 feet or more to the greatest extent possible, which doesn't necessarily support the CDC guidance. So the health department is fully behind CDC guidance on that. And that's about as much as I can say on that. I do think we're moving into moderate fairly well over the next couple of weeks. But again, I can't give you a 100% promise on that. With moderate, the CDC does state physical distancing 6 feet or more to the greatest extent possible for all K through 12. So there is a little bit of leniency there with reduced community transmission with the social distancing. Okay, so that's as much as I can give you right now on it. And again, we'll try to just keep you updated in the loop as we move through these stages of transmission. A good place, if you haven't already seen this, is the Pima County website for the data and metrics. I'll just pull this up really quick so y'all can see this under data and stats right here in the progress report. This gives you a good sighting of where you're at for those metrics. You can see that we're not in the criteria met for the cases according to the data that we have. However, we are moving in the right direction for percent positivity. So that's important data to know. And I think for those of you on the call that have been on the weekly webinar series, we do every Thursday do a session for public schools at 11 o'clock, which if you're not on, there's someone from your district that's on it, that we're usually giving the most up-to-date guidance on that. So that's a really good reference for where we're at in terms of those transmission levels. Okay, anything else that we need to cover? I think beyond the graduation piece at this point in time.
Brian, can you just speak to that one? You wrote down 150 per person. Can you just clarify what that meant?
Yeah, so that's Jennifer was saying when they calculate what the square footage should be per person, it's 150 square feet per person for that location. And that's the safety consideration they look at for the application process currently for the county approved application, which this doesn't have anything to do with prom or graduation.
Gotcha.
Okay. So with graduation, we're going to give a little bit more time to start to come up with any kind of formal recommendations for that. Already, I think you all have given really great ideas on what you're doing for graduation. And to be completely transparent with you, that's way more thought than we've put into it at this point in time. So I'm going to go back and compile some of the notes from what I heard from what your share outs were. And then hopefully we can have some formal guidance on that as well. And we'll issue that out to you. We do. I know that there's been applications with the TCC and with some other really large venues. And from a conversation that I had with the director earlier, we think that's completely appropriate to move forward with the graduation events at the TCC. For some of those events, we are thinking of 10-foot social distancing between family pods, with up to possibly 5 for each family pod. This isn't formally decided as our communicated guidance. I'm just trying to be transparent in where we're at with our thinking. So having up to 5 members per student that would be allowable on a ticket with 10 foot of social distancing in between those groups of 5. The thing you're gonna have to think about if you do go with that guidance is there's gonna have to be almost like a parking director when you're pulling up to a large parking event, someone that's indoor outdoor, Mr. Malice. someone that's kind of guiding people through that spacing and social distancing, directing them to their seating areas, because it's going to adjust by pod. Because if you have 2 people here, that 10-foot distancing is going to be different than it would be for a full set of 5 individuals. So those are considerations to take into your planning.
I have a question. Why is it 10 feet?
Because of the increased volume of people. So if you have 5 people per pod, we think that 10-foot distancing is a more adequate rule for that social distancing between individuals.
Okay.
But again, remember, that's not the formal recommendation at this point in time. This is just where we're thinking in terms of the guidance for that, okay? The other thing that I wanted to mention too that came up in conversation was indoor versus outdoor, and your planning in regards to the logistics behind that. If you do an indoor location at a different venue, the nice thing is that they take most of that planning for you, right? So that's pretty much all done, and they have guidance that they follow, and they can take care of it for you. One of the things about doing an outdoor location, I think there's opportunities to get student feedback and to involve students in the planning for those events, which would increase the rate of participation in mitigation guidance, right? So if the students are involved in the planning around the mitigation and the communication of that mitigation, it's more likely to be accepted on a peer-to-peer basis. So that's those are some other things to kind of think about with your planning.
My experience is planning for a venue that's not at your school is difficult because we don't know what's going to happen with coronavirus over the course of the next 6 weeks. And, if it's at our site, it's relatively easy to say, hey, things have gone downhill, we can't do it. But you could potentially lose your deposit if you go to another site. So there are pros and cons with going to other sites versus having it at your site as well.
Yeah, good point. Would that be helpful to assemble a list of pros and cons for indoor and outdoor locations?
I feel like if someone hasn't already chosen a location, indoor or outdoor, particularly if it's not at their site, then they're going to have to do it at their site. I think that a lot of locations are probably booked because we're all trying to do our prom, push it back as long as possible, and graduation as well. Like all the graduations are taking place so at the same time. So if someone hasn't booked their graduation site, or they haven't reserved their site for their prom that they're going to have in May, then they're going to probably not have a whole lot of options in terms of reserving those facilities. Yeah,
that's good feedback. Thank you. So I've gone 10 minutes over your time, and I'm gonna, if you need to leave at this point in time, please feel free to. I'm gonna leave the last 5 minutes just for open comment or for open questions, things that we need to consider. You can do that by chat, or you can just unmute and ask, and we'll record all that information as well. And then we'll do a hard close at 4:45.
I was just curious if, this is Matt Donaldson from Empire. I was just curious if any of the other principals had been talking about numbers for graduation that you were going to allow. How many tickets per kid, if anybody's kind of talked through any of that yet.
Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is Matt Munger from Ironwood Ridge. So I think initially what we were working under the premise of with direction from leadership, and granted, let me just provide the caveat, these are very, very early conversations.
Sure, yeah.
Ms. Boulay and Mr. Malice and I are meeting weekly to just continue to plan and strategize and collaborate for our students. But we were initially looking at 4 family members or guests per student. That's very early in the planning stage because, of course, we're all very aware of the numbers of transmission and such, and then the venues. But right now we're looking at 4.
Okay.
Matt, this is Teresa. In our conversations, we want to at least have 2, but ideally would like to have at least 4.
Thanks, Teresa. That's kind of where we're sitting right now too, is thinking for blended families and not wanting to keep people out, but also making sure that we are putting some type of limit on it. Because as I hear about that 10-foot distancing piece, I think about what's the possibility of doing that with families in our stands. That gets pretty tricky.
Yeah, my biggest stress is not the inside, it's the outside. Because when we limit inside the stadium, at least on my campus, you can pretty much walk in from the desert and be outside, and then trying to manage all the people up against the fence. So I am super anxious about graduation because of the uncontrollables. Like, yeah, I can block off the road, but if somebody really wants to get here, they're just going to tromp through the desert and they can see from the fence, you know?
I'm worried about those same things because we saw that with our athletics.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the 10-foot distance barrier sure complicates things.
Well, that's good feedback for us to hear now, because that's something we'll take back to planning overall. Jennifer, do you have any comments in relation?
Yeah, I think maybe part of the 10-foot spacing, at least during our public organized event reviews that we've conducted, when you have different pods of people, they did recommend more spacing for ingress and egress. So if someone's walking through the crowd, that extra spacing between, we'll just call them family pods, still allows for that physical distance between sitting or standing families. So just to get a little bit of reference as to why the 10-foot may have come up, that just allows for better ingress and egress and allows for still maintaining appropriate distance.
This is Tara Boulay. I apologize. I'm in my car if you can't hear me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. You know, one of our biggest obstacles we had with athletics out on the field, even then and outside, was how do we get the stands, you know, to be safe and to create those pods. So I'm interested in hearing if anybody has come up with a way to do that, because we used caution tape, we used signs, and it was difficult to manage the adults that just kind of walked over them, sat on them, knocked them over, you know, and inadvertently often. But that's one of the things that I'm concerned about. You know, if we talk about 2 to 4 people at graduation, it's going to be all hands on deck just to manage the adults, and that night is supposed to be about the kids. So I know that's one of our biggest concerns, is how are we going to keep people separated in a stand where they're just so used to packing in like sardines. So any principals out there that have some ideas that have worked for you out on your football field, please let us know, because we were struggling.
I'll jump in, Tara. This is Teresa, and you're exactly right. The adults are a heck of a lot harder to manage than the kids, and we found that with football too. We bought these big long banners that we lay down on the bleachers so that we are able to separate them, and they can't sit on those banners. So if you want, I can send you the link. I mean, it's an extra cost, but we found that it was extremely helpful to us to managing the adults.
No, yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Hey, will you send me that link too, Teresa?
Sure. Brian, would it be better for me to send it to you and then you can just send it out?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, if you want to send me that link, I'll send it out to everyone that was on this meeting today.
Thank you.
Great solutions. All right, I've kept you 15 over now. But I think for me, this was really productive. I really appreciate your time today and your willingness to come to the table and talk to us about this. I hope we're really kind of waiting on the state for 1 or 2 things, but if we don't hear anything from the state by next Wednesday, expect us to go ahead and just publish some guidance, and that will hopefully move things forward. A couple comments coming up here that I think are really important to read out. Any principals interested in scheduling a regular Pima County area principal meeting on graduation, prom, and etc. And if you are, just go ahead and reply all to that email. And if you all want to do that and not involve us, we're fine with that. If you want us to kind of spearhead that and create that space for collaboration, we can do that too. And I'm seeing a couple of thumbs up to your comment, Mr. Munger, there. So it looks like you got some folks interested and willing. And I'm seeing a hand applause in Ms. Belay. All right, so.
Can I just let me put my email address, I guess, in the chat box, and we can just sort of go from there. And if you want to email me, then you can kind of figure out what a good time is. And then if you're amenable, maybe we can schedule time to involve Pima County Health, just to review any updates on metrics, guidelines, anything that's coming to the forefront that we may not have heard in the public. We're all very much interested, you've heard, in doing what's best for our students and giving something back to them and to their families that they've lost in the last year.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for taking the initiative on that. That's awesome. Yeah, and anything you need from us, please reach out. My email is brian.eller@pima.gov. I'll put that in the chat. I do have a whole team of folks that are here to support this effort and others as we get back to school. But again, thank you all for your time today. At this point, I'm going to cease recording. I'll send out this recording to everyone on this call. I might have to post it on a YouTube channel because there are some complications sometimes with the teams and